Hello, my little chickadees. Today we are going to be talking about Bootstrap's built-in D class, their display class, and how we can use that to hide and to adjust elements on an HTML page. All right, so you can see that I have an HTML document set up here, and we have this linked to the Bootstrap CDN. You can get access to that Bootstrap CDN on getbootstrap.com. That's right here. Click to copy, and you also are going to want to import the popper, which just needs to be put somewhere inside of the body. So you can see that I have set up a container, a row, and 3 columns. Bootstrap's columns are set up to where there are 12 implied or virtual columns. And if you don't give them any kind of a definition for how many columns things take up, they're just going to take up as much space as they can. Within the row. So if I have 3 columns, they're going to take up 1/3 of the total row. If I want to change this, say I want to make that 7, or I want to make that 2, or I want to make it 9, we can see that it's going to change the size of the columns. And everything here is also taking up 100% of the height. You can see in my CSS, I have the HTML on the body taking up 100%, and the containers that are holding my columns taking up 100% of the height using Bootstrap's built-in H or height class. This is going to make something that maybe looks like, like an email user interface UI if you're nasty, which is the basis of what this particular tutorial is made to help someone create. So we have these 3 columns, but what I want to do is I actually want these columns, right now they're sort of like vaguely responsive, but I want column 1 and 2 to actually disappear when I get the screen size particularly small. All right, so I can use Bootstrap's built-in breakpoints to do that. And what those breakpoints actually imply are on Bootstrap's documentations. You can sort of see here they're small, medium, large, extra large breakpoints, and how large the screen has to be in order for that to take place. Now, the breakpoints are the lower bound of where something happens. So since I want something to happen when this screen gets small, what I actually need to do is I need to create a default that is what's going to happen before we get to the small point. So when it's smaller than the small breakpoint, and then everything after the small is going to be dictated by what I put with my small breakpoint rule. All right, so let me show you what that means, okay? So I am going to magically create a container to hold my columns 1 and columns 2. All right, and now that I have these things inside of a container and inside of their own row here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this a column itself. Great. So we can see that the 2 columns inside of this row and this column are taking up as much space as they can. So that's kind of neat. That's kind of what I want to have happen. But inside of this, what I actually want to have happen is when this gets to small, I want these to disappear. So I'm going to put the default display. So I'm using the D class, which is their display class. I'm going to put the default display to none. Boom, they have vanished, right? Like so much dust in the wind, all right? But when this gets to small, all right, I want it to show. So I'm going to say, okay, D. Now I'm going to put the breakpoint parameter here, small, and grid. And we're back. But notice when we get below small, that small is again the lower bound, it disappears. Boom. Wowie zowie. Now, this is really great. This is doing so much, but what if I actually want to do something even more? What if when it gets to, let's say, like a medium screen size, I want column 1 and 2 to stack, kind of like what they were doing when I got to a very small screen size without applying any of these parameters? Well, I can do that too, right? Remember, this column tells you how much of the container each of these are going to take up. So let's say that I was to put each of these columns at 12. All right. Well, now they are stacking. That's great. That's exactly what I want to happen, but I don't want that to happen all the time, right? I just want it to happen when it gets smaller than large, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put sort of the parameter, the breakpoint parameter here. Let's actually make it at small. All right, so at small, that's going to happen. All right, now again, this is the lower bound to where these things happen. So when it gets down to, at small, it's going to keep doing this, right? But when it gets to large, I actually want it to go back to the other column setup where the columns are taking up their full space. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put column, right, and large. Again, that's our lower breakpoint. So once it gets to large and above, and then let's make it take up instead of, let's make it take up 5, and let's make this one column large 7. All right, and let's see what happens. Boom. Wow. So now we have our responsive UI, which is going to make sort of 2 stacked columns when we get to the medium breakpoint, and then when we get down to small, it's going to make them completely disappear, all using Bootstrap's built-in D or display class. All right, I hope you found this helpful. This was made in conjunction with Bay Valley Tech, which is an amazing free coding boot camp based out of Modesto, California. If you want to learn more about them, check them out in the comments. Again, everything they do is free, so feel free to support what they do with any donations if you're feeling flush right now. Thanks so much for listening. Check you later.